Welcome to the Birth Protectors Podcast. I'm Rahelios.
And I'm Celeste, and we are bringing in a father's perspective on home birth.
How long should your labor be? So let's talk about that. We've had an interesting situation. We just went and visited somebody that we know that just had a baby. But the interesting thing is Celeste went over thinking that the baby was going to be delivered like over a week ago because she went into labor and
having regular contractions that started and then just went away.
Yeah, and so this is very normal. So so the end of the story already, like I said, is her baby's born and is perfectly healthy and everything went really well. But her labor went on for over a week. And it's totally okay. So, but I can guarantee you, because when over a week ago she called Celeste went over there thinking, oh, she's going to have the baby tonight, and left me with the kids, and it was a whole thing, you know? And very common, it's totally common that this is the point where, a couple will decide, oh, I'm having the baby, it's time to go to the hospital to deliver, labor's going, I'm having really strong contractions, and you go to the hospital, and it really is labor. This isn't like false labor, you know, it really is labor. It really is your body going through the process, and the thing is when you get to the hospital and then that is happening and they'll be like, oh yeah, you're in labor, you're dilating, and then it slows down, that's the perfect chance for, here we go with the interventions.
Yeah, it's like, oh, labor stalled out, so we gotta start doing things to speed things up. And making you feel like, oh, well, I just couldn't go into labor on my own, or my body just wasn't working. My labor just stalled. And either that, or the flip side is this idea of just that they'll tell you, oh, you're not in labor yet. And they call it false labor. And this idea of false labor is ridiculous as well, because it's all labor. Every contraction that you have leading up to the birth of your baby is part of this process. And it doesn't always happen within a certain amount of hours, and it has to start and stop and end with the baby. Like, it can start and stop, and there's so many different patterns of labor that can happen when it's just left to just happen.
Yeah, and when the process is allowed to just go on its own, and it might go on for a week, and that's a good thing. It's a fine thing, because like in this case, the actual, like, when the baby decided to come out, ultimately, it was like really quick, because her body was like slowly in the process of getting ready and opening up, and that's actually a really common thing, and it's not a problem. It's like nothing is wrong there, and like Celeste is saying, all labor, it's all just a process. See, there's this mindset that they want you to think, okay, you go for 40 weeks, and then at some point, all of a sudden, you start labor, and the baby then needs to be born in a certain amount of time, or it's an emergency.
Yeah, if your labor goes on too long, that's bad. If your labor slows down, that's bad.
That means your body's broken. Oh, your labor stopped, your body's broken. We gotta pump it full of drugs and get it going.
No, the body knows what it's doing, and sometimes labor will just slowly stall out just because the mother needs to rest. Recoup her energy.
Yeah, and that could be days and days in a row. It could happen like that.
Yeah, it could just be, little stretches of labor, and then it goes away, and then you're, back to feeling like normal, and then you have another little bout of labor the next night, and this happened to me several times. And it's mentally can be a little bit challenging when your labor is really drawn out like that, because you might get your hopes up that, I might have a baby tonight. And then the labor kind of contractions just go away, and it can feel disappointing and mentally challenging, especially if you have like several nights and or weeks in a row of like this labor that just starts and stops but doesn't seem to go any farther. It can be mentally challenging.
And you might even call your people. Like, I remember with our first baby, like my parents, they came from out of town from like 4 hours away, and drove up and
got a hotel,
and they were like, oh, it's gonna be any day, and then they stayed, and then it was like, oh no, the baby wasn't born, and then the next day they're like, oh, it's definitely gonna be today, and this went on for like 3 or 4 days.
And I finally went home.
And then they went home, and they were like, what? And then they ended up coming back again, and it was just like, everybody gets all bent out of shape and like, oh, something must be wrong, and and nothing's wrong is the thing. It's like, it's only because we have all these preconceived notions that were put into our heads by a system that is off base. Like, there's this other thing that you've probably heard of, Braxton Hicks contractions. Like, I don't know where I heard, but someone was asking, well, how do you know when it's a Braxton Hicks contraction as opposed to a real contraction? And I'm just face palming, because they're all real contractions.
Yeah.
Just because some doctor said, oh no, I'm going to put my name behind these contractions that happen. And they actually do have all the, well, if it's, they have like criteria that's like, oh no, this is a Braxton Hicks contraction. It's not an actual labor contraction. And that's all, it's a baloney.
Yeah.
It's all contractions. It's all your body getting ready for labor.
Yeah, your uterus
is simple.
It's doing what it needs to do to prepare.
Yeah, and you don't need to know, oh, was that a real contraction or was that a fake contraction? They're all real contractions. Contractions are contractions. Okay? And they could be happening they start like a couple months before you have your baby. It's not like that's what really happens. I don't know why we're not prepared for that, and that's why we're talking about it. So you will be prepared, and realize that it's totally normal and totally fine.
And it's all part of the process. It doesn't have to look some certain way. And every one of our baby's labors was different. It was a different pattern. It was a different length of time, different in the way that it started out. Different in the way of like, whether it was like start and stop or just like coming out of the blue and then just, baby coming really fast. Like, I've had such a wide variety of like labor experiences, and they're all unique. It's like each baby has its own like journey, like, and your journey is going to be different with each baby for whatever reason. It's like whatever that baby needs to get into position in your pelvis and for your body to open up. But
yeah,
it works.
Yes. So the the realization is that all of that is good and fine, and no, you're not broken. And what really happens when it's a hospital involved in these situations is, again, this is like totally normal. Like, this occurs most of the time, these different patterns that we're talking about. But when you go into a hospital, they only accept one pattern. And they think any other pattern is anomalous, and it's a reason to intervene and start you on Pitocin drip and tell you that your body's broken and that you're not progressing. Like, they love to just, failure to progress.
Yeah,
and that's a reason not only to give you
common.
Pitocin, but they'll, like, go straight into recommending a C-section at that point. Tell you, your body's broken, this baby ain't gonna come out, we're gonna have to chop you open. And it really is absurd and barbaric, but that's what they do. That is what they do. And then they start putting fear and telling you, if you don't do this, you're gonna die. Your baby could die. And if you don't, okay, you want to wait. Okay, we're going to give you 30 more minutes to have this baby. And so now you get women who aren't even having contractions anymore. Like, their labor has stopped and they're trying to push, and they're trying to, like, push the baby out.
Yeah.
Or they, like, give them Pitocin, which causes, those are false contractions, if anything. It's an artificial thing.
Drug-induced contraction.
Yeah, and now it's like, push, come on, get this labor going. Because now you're, like, stressed out because they gave you 30 minutes or they're going to cut you open.
Yeah,
and
you're on a time limit and you're full of stress because of that. And it's like, yeah, how is your body supposed to do what it's designed to do under those circumstances? Labor requires for you to be at peace and, have oxytocin flowing and feeling safe. And
what's oxytocin? Talk about that a little bit. People may not know what that.
Oxytocin is the hormone that is responsible for contractions, and it's also the love hormone. It's what you produce when you hug somebody. It's the feel-good hormone.
And you said it's responsible for contractions?
Well, because oxytocin is what creates the contractions. I don't know scientifically how this works. All I know is that, so they have a drug that sometimes doctors will refer to as oxytocin, and but it's not. It's a synthetic drug mimicking oxytocin, but it does not do the same thing in the body. But it does cause contractions.
and so what about Pitocin? Obviously they're kind of related or something.
Well, yeah, Pitocin is the drug that is mimicking oxytocin.
But the body doesn't make Pitocin.
No.
So Pitocin is the fake version.
Yeah, Pitocin is the fake version that has side effects, by the way. You can look them up.
And see, here you're, okay, we've had all these babies. I still don't know this stuff. So, we're not experts at, like, medical anything. So, just so you know. Or I'm not, at least.
Yeah, well, I've learned a lot over the years, but not from my own births, because we've had all our babies at home. And my first experience with hospital birth was after having 6 of my own babies, home births, and being there to support another mom in the hospital. And it was a huge shock to witness the brutality and medical coercion, is that the word?
Coercion. Yeah, because how they were just trying to force her into doing everything that she didn't want.
Yeah,
and did force her. Not trying to force her, they did force her.
Yeah. It was very, very traumatizing, and
to traumatizing to who? To everyone.
To everybody, including me, just witnessing the trauma. But it was actually, pretty standard hospital birth as hospital births go, but I wasn't prepared for that. Like, I'd never witnessed it firsthand, and I kind of went in a little naively thinking, well, if I just help her advocate for her wishes.
Because she had you could back up a little bit.
A natural birth.
Yeah, and she had, she totally wanted a natural birth, a home birth, and her husband was like, just not comfortable with
Scared.
it. He was worried, and that doesn't seem safe, and very, very common things that husbands come up with, because they're like, it just doesn't seem safe, and I want my baby to be safe. I'm not going to agree to this. I think we need to, let's go to the hospital. So she...
Very common scenario.
Yes. And so she was like, well, okay. And, she worked with her midwife or doula or whatever, and said, well, how about if I just, they were like, you can come up with a birth plan. Like, it'll be okay. You can come to the hospital, but you can have all the things that you want. You can refuse whatever you want.
Whatever you want.
And I'll be there to help and, help advocate for you. And so she was like, okay, we can do this. And so she really had a whole plan laid out of all the things that she did want and all the things that she did not want and wasn't going to do. And she was like really determined and strong.
Very well written out birth plan that originally the doctor was like, sounds great.
Yeah,
okay.
Sure, that's
the
all
nurses,
great.
So we showed it to the nurses when we got there.
And let's what were some of the things in that birth plan, for example, like some of the specifics of things that she didn't want and did want.
I don't think I remember all of them.
Well, yeah,
probably
but what
don't,
are some
but
of them?
For sure.
Like she definitely didn't want an episiotomy.
She didn't want an episiotomy. She didn't want a C-section. She wanted no drugs. She wanted to have skin to skin with the baby immediately, and she didn't want the cord to be cut, and she wanted her husband to be able to be the one to cut the cord, and she didn't want him to have the eye ointment, and she didn't want him to receive the shots and the vitamin K injection, and
her midwife and the doctor that was going to deliver agreed to all of this. They said, sure, that's all fine.
Yeah, but
what actually happened?
But she was on a time limit from the moment she walked in because her water had broken.
So why does that create a time limit?
Because they will not let you go longer than 24 hours before C-section. Like, if you haven't had the baby within 24 hours of your water breaking, they're going to give you a C-section.
Because they say it's a huge emergency at that point, right?
Yeah, your baby's going to die. Risk of infection.
And by the way, that's bullshit. Because we've been there, done that.
Yeah. I had my water break 2 days before I went into labor with our last baby. So, that is a ridiculous restriction. And if anything, once the water breaks, they should be like, okay, well, we shouldn't do any internal exams, but no.
Yeah, because their whole reason is like, oh, the water's broken, now infection can be there, and that's why they're like, you got 24 hours or it's an emergency because it's going to get infection.
So why?
But meanwhile, they're sticking their fingers and crap in there, which is the thing that's going to introduce infection.
That's what's going to cause infection. And
come on, people.
That happened to my mom in my own birth, and she got an infection from the doctor who my dad saw open the door
with the sterile gloves on.
With his sterile gloves on before going to do the cervical exam, and so she got a really bad infection and had to take antibiotics, and I had bad effects from that. Anyways, that's a whole nother long story. So
let's go back to this other birth with the birth plan. Oh, okay, yeah.
But that's a whole nother tangent. But the whole birth plan, you can have a perfectly written out birth plan, but as soon as anything goes outside of their boxes that they require.
Well, so what happened? Like, be specific in this case, because, like, what literally happened? Because so she had this whole birth plan. That's where we left off before going on tangents.
Yeah. So that
And Celeste was there, by the way. Celeste was one of the support people in this situation. So she was like there. She was in, through the whole process.
Basically, I mean, she didn't even get to their time limit, but her labor stalled out. She was really tired, and her contractions got slower and farther apart. And she
was trying really hard to push the baby out, right?
Yeah, I think she was pushing before that.
Because she's like, we gotta get this done.
But then she was just like getting tired, and she really just needed to rest. And she actually fell asleep in the hospital bed, and we kind of like left the room, and we're like, she needs a nap. But while we were thinking, this is fine, she can just rest, the medical team was getting really antsy. And when she woke up from her nap, the doctor came in, the surgeon, and was like, you need to get that baby out, and started yelling at her and telling her that, because she was like, no, I don't want a C-section. And so she was refusing. Because
they were telling her, we're going to give you a C-section just because the baby hadn't been born yet?
Yeah, they decided it's too long, your labor stalled out.
And how long had it been at this point?
Maybe...
was it...
Maybe 12 hours?
Yeah, so we're not talking
she wasn't to the 24 hours.
It hadn't been like days and days or anything like that.
Yeah, so... But they were also telling her that his heart rate wasn't good, which it was doing very like common, just decelerating a little bit during the contraction and coming back up, but they were scaring her about that.
Yeah, they act like, so that's like that, like that's totally normal, by the way, but that's always something that they use for an excuse to intervene. Like that's why they gave my mom a C-section and almost killed her and my sister.
Yeah, like,
because they were like, look at the heart rate, it's decelerating during contractions. It's like it always does that.
Yeah, it's like
okay.
The only time that is concerning is if the baby's heart rate isn't coming back up after the contraction. But that's a whole nother story.
Yeah. Okay, so that was their excuse, and they were like, you need a C-section.
Yeah, and so the doctor was literally yelling at her and telling her it was going to be her fault if her baby died. And she was like, and so they gave her an ultimatum. They said, you can try the vacuum first, or you can go for a C-section. Basically giving her like the choice of vacuum extraction or C-section, and they didn't even give her the option of just continuing to labor.
Yeah.
And
it's like, and so meanwhile, what about all her birth plan?
She chose the vacuum extraction, which was
definitely not on her birth plan,
and extremely traumatic. And
why was it extremely traumatic?
And then did a episiotomy without saying anything. And
okay, wait, like re-emphasize here, they cut her vagina open without even telling her they were gonna do it. Like, that's the kind of shit they'll do to you in the hospital. They do that stuff.
All they gotta do is, I think it's necessary right now. Never mind that she said she didn't want this. So it's just infuriating.
And this episiotomy, like, if you don't realize what it is, it's like, it's a major cut. Like, we're not talking they cut a little flap of skin or something.
No, they cut through the muscle, and yeah, women just have like...
And they did it to her with no painkiller, by the way.
Yeah, no numbing, but it's...
Like, This is barbaric. The stuff that they do right now.
So, yeah, and then...
In the safety of the hospital.
So, continuing with the story, the vacuum extraction, hurt the baby's head, and as soon as the baby came out, they...
Well, what do you mean it hurt the baby's head? Like,
cut into his scalp, and So as soon as he came out, they whisked him away.
He's all
And
bloody. Like we're talking major injury
cut and
here.
clamped the cord. And
which was against her birth plan.
Yeah, so one by one, I watched every single one of her wishes be disregarded.
And here's the thing you got to understand is that there was never anything wrong with her birth process in the first place. If she would have been at home, this would have been a perfectly normal, perfectly safe birth.
Yeah.
But instead, they disregarded every one of her birth. Like, what did they give him the shot too? Like, all of a sudden now he needs the vitamin K shot. All of a sudden now he needs the drops in his eyes. Did they do that too?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they just did everything, and I feel like, she just kind of gave up and defeat and just went along with their wishes. And
well, yeah, she'd been physically brutalized as a piece of meat at that point, totally exhausted, totally physically destroyed.
It's just so wrong. And
this is normal. Like, this is standard stuff.
Yeah, but I didn't know it going in, so it was very traumatizing. I left the hospital that day, like, just in tears. And that's a lot of part of why I feel like I have to say something. Do something.
Yeah. And so the husband, by the way, in this case, his whole intention was, I don't feel safe. I want to protect my wife. I want to protect my baby, and that's why they chose the hospital. And then all of that complete brutalization of mom and the baby. It was very traumatic physically for the baby and the mom. Like, horrible pain and torture that no one should ever have to go through in a normal lifetime. Like, this is the kind of stuff, like, you don't ever go through that kind of thing unless a really bad accident happens, like you're in a car wreck or something like that. Really horrible stuff. This is not just natural things that you need to go through, but it is if you decide to have your baby in a hospital. And so Dad kind of got a new perspective, and the rest of their babies, how many did they have now at home?
2 more.
Yeah, 2 more, and they were both home. And yeah, it's so, and that was way better as far as the birth processes. So, I mean, so here's just another example, or a couple other examples of things to consider from our own personal experience, like first-hand experience being there.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I have much more to say about that right now.
Well, okay then. So, we have we're just starting out on this podcast, but there are other episodes, depending on where you're listening to this. It's probably pretty obvious where the other episodes are. You can find all of the episodes as they come out by visiting our website, which is birthprotectors with an S, birthprotectors.com. All our podcasts are there. We'd love it if you sign up for our email list so we can stay in touch with you. In the event that we got shut off of YouTube or shut off of any of our other channels, we can still stay in touch, let you know where we are, and also let you know about other things that we are doing. We're developing a birth checklist of items that could be helpful in a home birth. We're thinking we're thinking about starting a more private group, like a private group where we can speak even more candidly and personally answer people's questions and things like that. So yeah, go to our website, birthprotectors.com. Again, it's just
you can send us any questions.
Oh yes. There's a contact form there. Please send us any questions you have. Like we'd love to get your questions and answer them on our next podcast. You can be anonymous. We won't bring up your name or anything unless you want us to. So you can totally ask a question and we'll answer it, and privately, as far as we'll keep your information private is what I'm trying to say. If so don't be afraid to ask anything, please. We'd love to get your questions, interact with us, or your comments, or if you don't agree with something we're saying, let us know that too. Go ahead and let us know. And feel free to leave comments. You might be watching this on YouTube or listening to this on YouTube. Leave a comment, positive or negative. Yeah, and we hope to get to know you better and maybe give you some good food for thought. So that's our podcast for today. Hope you enjoyed.